Hello, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Hamas calls for another Palestinian intifada. Israel is set to invest almost $1 billion in protecting communities along the Gaza border, and we'll give you a peek into what just might be the most inspiring beauty pageant on the planet. I'm Natasha Kirchak here with the latest news in Israel. The Hamas rulers of the Gaza Strip are praising the Palestinian Authority police officer who shot and injured 3 Israeli soldiers yesterday. But that's not all. They're now calling on others to pick up where the officer left off. 25-year-old Mohammed Turkman is being recognized as a Palestinian martyr by the terror group, which released a statement honoring him as a hero. In response to the immediate threat, Israeli troops returned fire, successfully killing the assailant who was armed with an AK-47 assault rifle. The incident occurred near a Jewish town north of Jerusalem. Hamas almost always glorifies terror attacks against Jewish civilians and soldiers, but went even further today by calling on more PA security personnel to join the Palestinian intifada. The 3 injured Israeli soldiers are all about 20 years old. One has been upgraded to moderate condition for serious gunshot wounds, and the other 2 were lightly hurt from shrapnel. This is a second attack at the same checkpoint by a Palestinian police officer this year. Another carried out a similar shooting, also injuring 3 soldiers last January. It looks like Hamas's threats are being taken seriously. The Israeli defense minister has just announced that the government is set to spend almost $1 billion towards beefing up security for Israeli communities near the Gaza border. Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman says Israel is planning to spend close to $909 million over the next few years. He's claiming the move is necessary given the growth of Hamas forces in Gaza, as well as a terrorist intent to ignite a new conflict on Israeli soil. Lieberman told the powerful Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee that he believes Hamas is making greater efforts to restrain more extreme jihadist groups on its territory from firing missiles at the Jewish state, due to his implementation of a forceful retaliation policy. The defense chief says that it's in Israel's security interest to improve the Palestinians' financial situation, and is lambasting Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Lieberman is charging that Abbas is far more concerned with creating a political legacy than improving the economy. The defense minister is also accusing Hamas of deliberately avoiding measures to improve the lives of Gaza residents. The regime hasn't yet approved a water purification system in the coastal enclave, even though they've already received $100 million from the World Bank, since the UN says a crisis could make the strip uninhabitable by 2020. Because of that, the Jewish state will have to come up with a plan in the next few months to supply Gaza with clean water. Israel has already agreed to supply the electricity needed to operate the treatment plant this past June. The Palestinian Authority is hoping that its request to join Interpol will be approved at the organization's annual General Assembly next week. But Israel is speaking out about the dangers a Palestinian membership could pose. Israeli officials have been speaking to their colleagues at the International Police Network, alerting them to the distinct possibility that the Palestinian Authority would leak sensitive information it would access if allowed to join. Interpol is the world's largest organization after the UN, and members regularly exchange intelligence to combat transnational crime, including terror. Israel is also concerned that Interpol could become politicized by letting the PA join, by lending de facto recognition of Palestinian statehood. The application is the latest in a series of unilateral efforts by the Palestinians to shore up greater support since the official peace process with Israel collapsed in 2014. Previous efforts to bring the Palestinian bid for a vote at Interpol have failed. If it is introduced, it requires approval from at least 2/3 of the 190 member states at the conference, which opens in Indonesia on November 7th. The Israeli public was shocked this week after leading journalist Ari Shavit was accused of sexual abuse by an American Jewish journalist. ILTV's Steve Leibowitz sat down with leading Times of Israel blogger Sarah Tuttle-Singer, who says the good news is that Israeli men are starting to learn what is and is not permissible behavior.
It's been a really rough few days for women right now. Many of us have found ourselves having to explain why what Ari Shavit did was not just inappropriate, but actually was assault. Many of us also weren't particularly surprised because this has been an ongoing thing in this country. We see it in the highest ranks of the police force. We've seen it in the IDF. We've even seen it in the Knesset. So I don't know if shocked is the right word, but I do want to say that I'm so touched and so grateful to the men who are coming forward to ask each other and to ask me and to ask the other women in their life what constitutes sexual assault. I think it's a very brave thing to do, and the fact that they're asking most likely means that they have never crossed the line. But I think it's really important to go over these points. I mean, first of all, it should go without saying that any time the word no is uttered in a sentence, whether it's across from someone at a bar or whether a woman is straddling you in the backseat of a car, as soon as she says no, or for that matter, as soon as a man says no, it needs to stop. It needs to stop right away, and don't pull the sad puppy face, don't get angry, don't make it awkward, just end it.
Has that been your experience that many Israeli men do cross the line?
Some do, and I mean, it's not just Israeli men. Many men have crossed the line, and oftentimes when you say no, they make it very uncomfortable. They either continue to push, and you end up doing something you really don't want to do, or they get angry, and you can be afraid. And I understand very much how Danielle must have felt in that situation where she's with a man who's in an incredible position of power over her. She feels cornered, she feels caged, but at the same time, she doesn't want to, in her own words, embarrass him because he is who he is, and she's afraid of how that will reflect on her. I mean, it's very complicated.
Do you get a sense, though, that maybe some Israeli men are starting to learn this lesson? I mean,
Sure.
We come from a tradition where people spoke about the actions of Moshe Dayan, of Gandhi, of some of the real legends in Israeli history. Defense Minister Mordechai was charged. You don't hear about that many cases of serious attacks. We did have the case here of Moshe Katsav, and we've had this latest case of Ari Shavit. But do you get a sense that Israeli men are at least starting to take notice and start to ask at least, or to realize where their boundaries are?
Right now I'm seeing that a lot, and I think that's wonderful, and it's commendable, and it's brave because it's admitting a lack of knowledge, and that's sometimes very hard, especially around a sensitive topic. It's hard to talk about this, but it's so important, and this is a conversation that we're finally having. And I'm glad it's starting to come to light. I mean, we saw this happen in the United States, I guess, when was the Clarence Thomas, Anita Hill thing? But 20 years ago? Something like this. And so I think, and I've seen it in America, a very big change in the way that American men are looking at women in the workforce. Sexual harassment is reported much more frequently now, which makes people a lot more careful. And so perhaps we're going to see that in Israel. I certainly hope so. But at the same time, I think it's also important to talk about what is okay. I mean, I think it's perfect.
So what is okay?
Right. Okay. So, I mean,
flirtation?
Sex,
he thought he was flirting. He says he thought he was flirting. So where are the lines of flirting end and the lines of harassment begin?
First of all, I think sex is a great thing. And people like to have sex, and people often being, some will say hit on. I think there's problems with that term, but flirting with someone can be really nice. It's nice to be flirted with, and it's nice to flirt back. First of all, I think in any professional setting like this, where a professional journalist, which, let's remember, Danielle is a professional journalist. She's right now, I think, a senior reporter at the Jewish Journal, very talented with a full array of work behind her, and certainly this was true in 2014. When you're in a professional setting, just don't do it. If you like someone, if you feel that there's chemistry, follow up with an email and say, hey, that was great. Would you like to have drinks sometime? And okay, he's married. That's between him and his wife and his family and the person he's approaching. So he could have done that. And then she would be in a position where she could just say no, and very easily. But instead, he took a...
She arrived to do an interview.
Right, she arrived to do an interview, and he diminished her by doing this. And he even told her, I believe, you can come back tomorrow and interview me. But, and that's just, it's appalling.
Sarah Tuttle-Singer, thanks so much for being with us at ILTV.
An op-ed article in the Wall Street Journal is stirring fears that U.S. President Barack Obama may be scheming to force a diplomatic resolution on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict at the United Nations in the last days of his term. The paper cites unnamed sources saying the White House has asked the State Department to develop an options menu for the president's final weeks. It goes on to report that one possibility would be to sponsor or at least allow a UN Security Council resolution condemning Israeli settlement construction. New American tax regulations could be introduced, revoking exemptions of those involved in the building. Obama could also back a draft setting the parameters for a final accord between the two sides or even seek formal recognition of a Palestinian state at the UNSC. The American leader could exercise executive action to override opposition from Congress, which has long argued that Palestine lacks internationally recognized attributes of statehood, such as a defined territory or an effective government. Obama's critics say any such action may bolster the BDS movement, encourage the legal harassment of Israeli citizens and supporters abroad, and even potentially criminalize the Israeli army. Speaking of leaders fighting for peace, it looks like this year's public memorial for late Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin will still be held, although possibly not in the tradition Israelis are used to. Organizers of the annual ceremony announced the event had to be canceled due to lack of funding for the first time in 20 years. Even though artists and other major presenters appear without charge, there just wasn't enough money to cover security and other necessary costs. The late leader's Labor Party says that's just not acceptable and is now arranging an alternative rally. Rabin was assassinated on November 4, 1995, during a pro-peace event at a plaza in central Tel Aviv, which has been renamed in his memory. Ceremonies have been held there each year on the Saturday night closest to the date of his murder. Rabin Square is still reserved just in case it becomes possible to go ahead and hold the memorial there this year. Last year, former U.S. President Bill Clinton addressed 100,000 people who gathered for the ceremony, which also featured a video message from President Barack Obama. Most people find it tedious and unnecessary to reinvent the wheel. After all, why put effort into creating something new that already exists? Well, one Israeli company called Softwheel has literally taken on the challenge. Joining us today is Talia Winoker-Ilizov from Softwheel Limited to tell us more. Thanks so much for coming in.
Hi, thank you, Natasha.
So, to begin, tell us about what Softwheel is. What do you guys do?
So, as you said, our tagline is Wheel Reinvented. What we do is we developed a smart wheel. By smart wheel, I mean that we've put suspension within the wheel. So the whole suspension mechanism is now within the wheel. This is a much smarter wheel that helps craft a much smarter planet because it's more energy efficient, it provides unparalleled comfort, and it even saves money.
So tell us about that. What does that mean? How could a wheel be more energy efficient for those of us who don't understand how your suspension mechanism works?
So I'll show you the wheel.
Okay.
Because I happen to bring the wheel with me.
Beautiful.
I'll explain a bit about the way the suspension works in order to explain how it saves energy. So the wheel is basically composed of a rigid rim and 3 suspension struts that are connected to a centered hub. When you ride on a flat terrain, the wheel just moves like any other high-quality wheel. But when you encounter an impact, the struts are compressed and the shock is absorbed. So imagine, for example, you're a wheelchair rider or a bicycle rider riding, let's say, on cobblestones. with a traditional wheel, with a spokes wheel, you would go over the cobblestones and you would feel the impact. The rider would feel the impact of every cobblestone. Just imagine that, every cobblestone.
Right.
If you ride with soft wheel, every time you go over the cobblestones, the mechanism goes into play, absorbing the shock, and the rider gets, I can't say it's no shock at all, but very minimal shock.
So this might be bad for people who like to text while they're driving, because now it gives them an extra incentive if the ride is more comfortable now. No,
Yeah,
I'm joking. But,
well,
you know, if you're a wheelchair user, this is a big deal, obviously, because...
It's a huge deal, because riding a wheelchair is so uncomfortable. I was amazed when I started working with software. I was amazed how uncomfortable it is, because it's such an absurdity. These are the people that need the most comfort, and then the ride is so uncomfortable. But with soft wheel, the ride is so much smoother.
And so this can be used for wheelchairs. What other types of vehicles?
So basically everything that has a wheel. We are already selling in the wheelchair market. We've just signed a contract with the biggest rehabilitation technology provider in the US. So you can find soft wheels in 120 locations across the US.
Wow.
But we're also working in the bicycle market. We're now in advanced discussions with a number of private and public operators in the field of bike share systems to pilot soft wheel and bike share systems in Europe, in the US, in Asia. And the next step is the automotive world. And actually, you were talking about texting while driving. Soft wheel is a wonderful solution for autonomous cars, for electric cars, and one of the reasons is the energy efficiency. So you've asked, why is it so energy efficient?
Right.
Basically, imagine the ride is so much smoother. Where do you lose the most energy?
What's the impact?
Well, when you stop and you have to reignite.
Right, exactly. The resistance.
Yeah, because the ride is so smooth and so fluent, there's much less stop, and it's much easier to maintain forward momentum, basically. Thus, you lose much less energy. And in tests that we did, we found that there's about 16% saving in energy.
Interesting. Now, are you in talking with big car companies who are interested in just putting these wheels into their cars before people buy them, or is the idea to have people individually buy these wheels and then put them onto their cars?
We are in talk with a number of very, very big companies, but this is all under serious NDAs, so I can't tell more.
Right.
I can't say more at the moment.
Now, how did you guys come up with the idea for something like this?
Well, it's actually this amazing man called Gilad Wolf, who's a farmer from the south of Israel. And he's a farmer and a very creative inventor, and he got injured and had to spend 6 months in a wheelchair. And then he realized how uncomfortable it is to ride a wheelchair. And Gilad was very used to riding tractors. And tractors have amazing suspension. So he said, let's take elements of suspension from riding tractors and put that into wheelchair, which is an interesting concept.
And it seems so basic to just come up with that idea, but I mean, it makes a huge impact.
It makes a huge impact, and that kind of thinking, that did not exactly work that way in the end, but what it did, it led to the idea of putting the suspension inside the wheel. And the initial idea was that it will be more comfortable, but then in all the tests that we did, we realized how much more energy efficient it is, and that you will not need pneumatic tires, and therefore you kind of eliminate the whole problem of flat tires, which is one of the amazing advantages in bike share programs, for example. So there's a whole world of advantages that was opened because of the suspension inside the wheel.
So, you said that it's available now in lots of different countries. It's for sale. You can go to specific locations and buy it?
Absolutely. In the wheelchair market, it's on sale, as I said, in 120 locations across the US, and it's on sale in 15 other countries, mainly in Europe and Asia at the moment, and also in Australia.
So I guess the big question here is, what's next for your company? What is your ultimate goal, with the product that you've created?
So first of all, we're now, thanks to a very generous grant from the Bird Foundation, we're at the end of the development process for a composite material wheel. This is happening in the US with an American partner, and it's going to be this very interesting, light, sophisticated wheel is going to be on sale by the end of the year. And in addition, as I said, we're selling thousands of units in the wheelchair market, we're piloting in the bicycle market, and we're in advanced R&D in the automotive market.
Are there any other products that you guys are working on, or is it mainly the wheel itself?
Well, it's just the wheel. It's the suspension mechanism in the wheel, but the applications for the way that you can combine the wheel in so many different modes of transportation. We're working, for example, we've just submitted a proposal to the Los Angeles Metro for implementing the wheel in first and last mile solutions.
Wow.
In the LA area. We're working with other organizations for other smart transportation solutions. So it's just a very, very, very big world of smart transportation, innovative transportation that we're working in.
Well, and it's interesting that it's coming, from Israel itself. Obviously, Gilad, he is an Israeli. Is your team mainly Israelis, or are you guys also working with people from other countries?
Our team, our R&D team, our CDO, our CEO, of course, we're all Israelis, but we have an office in the US. We have a few more offices worldwide. So we're working with big distributors, agents worldwide.
Well, it's good because I can tell you this, as much as I love Israel, there are a lot of transportation issues that can be worked on here, and it seems like you guys have a product that could, even help Israel itself. So, kol hakavod lechem, good job, and thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Natasha.
All right, guys, at first it may sound a bit startling when you hear the Holocaust Survivors Beauty Pageant was just held in the Israeli city of Haifa. But after you hear this story, you'll understand that the event is held to honor the women who lived through the concentration camps and death marches of Nazi Germany. After all, strength and perseverance can be a lot more beautiful than youth itself. Hundreds of relatives and other well-wishers turned out to support 14 elderly women who looked radiant in their elegant and glittering gowns while cautiously stepping down the runway. Organizers say the fourth annual pageant is an opportunity to provide these women who experience such horrors in their early lives the chance to enjoy a little glamour and attention as they enter their 80s and 90s.
Tonight we're letting some women who survived the Holocaust have something that was robbed from them in their youth. They never had first dates, they never had high school proms and such. So we're letting them enter a beauty contest. And this is for them to enjoy something that when they were young and barely surviving through the Nazi Holocaust, want to give something back to them tonight. It's for them to enjoy.
The youngest contestant, 73-year-old German-born Malka Gorka, lost her entire extended family during the Second World War other than her parents, with whom she came to Israel when it was founded in 1948. The oldest contestant is 89-year-old Carmela Ben Yehuda, who was born in Hungary. She managed to survive the Auschwitz death camp and came to live in the country while it was still under British rule in 1945. The winner of the beauty pageant was Anna Grinis. The 75-year-old beauty queen was only 2 days old when the war broke out and was forced to flee the Nazis from Russia with her mother, in fear of their lives.
חלק הגדול מהחיים שלי, כשהייתה אימא בחיים, היא כל הזמן סיפרה לי על התקופה הזאת. איך זה היה בילדות, ושאנחנו ברחנו מהמוסקבה, איפה אני נולדתי, ושם לא היה מה לאכול, וזה בקושי אנחנו חיינו.
6 million Jews were killed by the Nazis during the Holocaust, and about 200,000 survivors are still alive in Israel. Many are given care from the competition's co-sponsor, The Helping Hand, and other organizations. Not everyone is a fan of the event, with some saying it appears to cheapen the memory of those who died. But the participants and judges insist those critics miss the entire point, because they strongly believe the contest is purely a demonstration of recognition and respect. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. Living in a world with so many cultures, languages, and customs all blended together can sometimes mean having to be careful with what we say. So today's word is lashon, meaning tongue. Now, since communication is one of the most important functions of the lashon, it's no surprise that lashon also means language in Hebrew. But from singing and speaking to tasting and beatboxing, there's no limit to what the lashon can do. Just be careful to always steer clear of lashon hara, which means the bad tongue in Hebrew, but really just refers to speaking badly about others. At the end of the day, it's better to keep your negative comments to yourself. After all, a clean tongue means a clean conscience. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast.
ILTV's weather forecast is sponsored by Adopt a Savta, taking care of Israel's lonely Holocaust survivors.
Tonight we'll have some scattered showers with a low of 68 degrees, but tomorrow should only be partly cloudy with a warm high of 75. All right, everybody, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.83 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv, and don't forget to check out our next update at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Thanks for watching, and see you tonight.